I'm Chris McDonough, a retired homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. Welcome everybody to the interview room. It's great to see everybody on a Sunday night. Thank you so much for being here with us. Man, do we have a program for you tonight. Of course, I'm broadcasting from an undisclosed location, as always. And Karen and I have been traveling, and hopefully our internet holds up tonight. We're having a little issue, but hopefully we won't have any more issues now that we're here with you guys. Boy, October 17th, it's flying, isn't it? Time is absolutely flying. Crime is not stopping, but we're moving ahead at 100 miles an hour. It's great to have everybody here. So let's see, just show me in the chat here where everybody's chiming in from, because let me tell you, I've got some really fascinating guests tonight. I'm going to first find out where everybody's at so that our guests are going to see where you all are coming in from. So we've got Tennessee in the house, Ohio, Pennsylvania, already Colorado, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Ontario, our good friends up in Canada. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Georgia, SoCal's in the house, BC, Canada, Edmonton, Massachusetts, Beantown's here, Delaware, Colorado, Greece. Welcome. I've had from Greece overseas. This is absolutely fantastic. Richmond, Virginia, Australia. Thank you for staying up in Australia, and our friends in the UK, Arkansas, Baltimore. Thank you for being here. A great thank you, obviously, as well to our supporters, our subscribers, our members. What a huge thank you to each and every one of you. And of course, I believe Karen and I, Dillan, and the TIR family believe we have the best moderators on YouTube, and that's Miss Sophia, Maui Girl, Mimi J2, Four Sons Mom, Diana, Melissa Hart, TJ, Sophie H, and Stephanie Hiram. It's so great to have each of you on our team as well. Boy, what a show, though, we've got for you tonight. I've got two wonderful guests that I'm going to bring in right now. First, I'm going to bring in Miss Francine Bardole. And some of you who've been following us have see this face. She's very familiar to the world, and she is an absolute amazing human being. And I'm just going to brag on you a little bit for a second, Francine,
okay.
so that everybody gets to know who you are. She, by the way, is a forensic analyst. She's a crime scene investigator, a DNA expert. She has a fascinating background. Listen to this. She was originally a women's advocate and was on the path to becoming an attorney, earning two college degrees while raising 5 children. Okay, she ended up going in a different direction, though, and eventually became a crime scene investigator with the West Jordan Police Department. Francine has also become one of the world's leading experts in MVAC forensic DNA collection. And she has helped solve cases for agencies all around the United States and internationally by using this cutting edge technology. This young lady right there, she developed a unique way of getting DNA off of shell casings called the Bardole Method. this method is named after her. So guys and gals, you are talking to the world expert on extracting DNA from not only shell casings, but we're going to talk about rocks. We're going to talk about glove boxes tonight because we're going to, I want to know what her thoughts are on the Suzanne Morphew and the DNA on those glove boxes. She's an incredible woman, and we're really excited to have you here tonight, Francine. So guys, let's show some love for Francine. Give her some hearts and some clapping over in the chat over there. Boy, she is here as an amazing, strong woman. So, and so I'm also going to set this up real fast because after submitting not only showcasing your research, found the method to solve crimes by pulling. Look at all the love you're getting over in the chat over there.
I love love. This is wonderful. I love them all. This is wonderful. I don't get that much love all the time. I'm glad I'm here.
Well, and not only just shell casings, but jewelry, fingernails, hair ties. I mean, you name it. You've been able to do it, and your mission now is to educate law enforcement on DNA intricacies and the science so that they can so that we, Ellie, retired as well, and our other guest that's going to be here, to really kind of make sense of it and solve crimes. So welcome again, Francine, and I promised our audience that you would take questions. Are you still up for that as we go along here?
You bet. Yeah. I want to educate, people. I do want to do the, if I don't have the answer, I will find the answer. But I do think it's very important that we empower ourselves with knowledge and knowing what's possible, which I believe, just like on the shell casings, anything is possible. And there are people out there that are probably like I was and wanting to do more and help others. And that's really what it's all about, is helping others.
Awesome. So I'm also going to now introduce our second guest, because this guy here and I are going to be like two students just sitting here and listening to you. I want to introduce to you Jason Jensen, and who's, by the way, he pulled over off the freeway. He said he was doing 80, but I think he was going closer to 90, and because as he was going on, Jason is also a very well-renowned, you've probably seen him on court TV a ton of times. He's always on there as a talking head. He is the lead PI for the family investigating the Kylen Schulte and the Crystal Turner homicides out in Moab, Utah. So guys, we've got the dog here who is not the dog with the long hair. This is the guy chasing all of the, because you'll notice he doesn't have any hair, but he is chasing.
More like a hairless cat than a dog.
More like a hairless cat. So we thought it was important to have him here to talk about those sweet women who lost their lives recently. And this is the gentleman that will know those types of answers. So Jason, welcome. I know you've been a PI forever, and working with Ellie, as well as just everything that you do for a very long time, and you're very well respected. And I'm glad you have this particular homicide. And maybe you can shed some light here also to our guests that have joined us. So let's show Jason a little love over there, and this, you're going to be able to ask him, all kinds of amazing questions, because he also has a tremendous amount of insight into the Gabby case. But we're going to get into that.
It's all locked in here.
It's all in there. So let's start first of all. Let's talk about DNA. And Francine, kind of guide us through. Could you have imagined that the technology would be here today that allows those types of extractions that you've been able to master? Could you have imagined that 20 years ago?
No, I really couldn't. I didn't have any interest in DNA. I just, I liked crime scenes. I liked, finding evidence. DNA, when I started, working crime scenes, you needed DNA about the size of a quarter, blood the size of a quarter in order to get a full profile. Didn't give a lot of thought until later on, and I noticed it was going in that direction. And I really became interested at that point. And you have to understand, it has really, in the 20 years that I started doing crime scene investigation, it has just grown in leaps and bounds, and especially the last few years, it's amazing. And if there's anybody out there that is interested, this is the place to go. I mean, really, DNA and this technology is going to be, it's far beyond what I will ever imagine, and I don't think I'm going to be around when it gets even better. So I think it's come so far that it's unbelievable to me.
Interesting. What do you want? Or what do you think is the most important piece of the Bardole method that you would want Ellie to kind of pick up on? So take us to class here. What exactly? Break this down for us.
Well,
Unpack.
yeah. Okay. So first of all, I want to say that law enforcement, can support me on this. Is for many years. In the 20 years that I was submitting, let's just say shell casings, I never really got any results that were probative to move forward. They're quite small, and the theory was that when you fire a firearm, the shell casing that's extracted is really hot and it destroys the DNA. But as I did a lot of research. I looked at shell casings under a microscope, skin cells, and I noticed the Netherlands were working on. Everybody's been working on across the world, trying to find a way to get DNA from shell casings. And so I just started doing a lot of research. And what I did is I believe that if in fact it was because of the heat destroying the DNA, then therefore would the skin cells that were embedded in the nooks and crannies of the shell casing be protected from the heat? So I started experimenting, and not a lot of people in the beginning believed in it, thought it was kind of crazy, but interestingly enough, and I have had the best support with West Jordan City Police Department, great police department. It was wonderful. We had a shooting where a fellow was shot in the neck by a driver, and the driver, they noticed him, they got his license plate, but by the time the police were able to get him, he had gotten rid of the gun. But we had in the back of his car, we had these shell casings that had popped out and were in the back of his car. And so I was able to use my method on that for the first time. And West Jordan supported me on that. And we got a DNA profile that belonged to the suspect. And everybody was shocked. I mean, I wasn't shocked because I believed that was what was going to happen. But it's just gotten better. And in fact, not too long ago, I would say probably a month ago, there was only, the more shell casings, the better the DNA. That makes sense. But just on 3 shell casings, I got a full CODIS profile. So sometimes people can be shedders and sometimes people aren't, but this one was really interesting. So you just have to try and see what you can get. And it's been really good because the DNA testing has gotten much better now on smaller amounts of DNA. You don't need DNA the size of blood the size of a quarter. It's less than a pinhead. And so it's gotten so much better, and the testing has gotten so much better. And so I've used it on other things, like you said, jewelry. Jewelry is something they always give back to the family. They don't really think they can get anything from it. But if there has been an assault, if there was, that there has been some sort of resistance, they put up a fight, there could be a good amount of suspect DNA on that jewelry. And so there's a lot of things we have to look at again and say, let's readdress this and see what we have.
Interesting. You used a terminology, shedders. Break that down for our audience.
Well, some people, so a good example, I guess the best one is that I can give you is if you ever had a dark pair of pants or something, pants on, and you take it off, you notice there's the white skin cells. When you shake them, it looks like dust, but those are skin cells that are coming off your pants. If you're on the inside of your pants, you shed a lot of skin. There are some people who shed more skin cells than other people. And so those are called shedders. Those are people that deposit more skin cells than the normal person. And we really can't say who is going to be a shedder and who's not. I think the time will come when you'll be able to. I have my own theory, but there will be a time when you'll be able to do that. But those are people that can give more DNA because they shed more skin cells.
Interesting, fascinating. So let's shift just for a second. Stay on where we're at because I want to get Jason in here to talk a little bit about uh, Kylen and Crystal. And the reason is your victims they're gunshot victims. Is that correct, Jason?
Yes, they are. Kylen and Crystal both were shot multiple times.
Okay. So what can you share? What do you feel comfortable sharing in relationship to what you guys are doing right now in relationship to those horrible, horrific homicides that you're chasing?
Sure, where we're at right now is we're trying to identify who this killer is by combining a couple of technologies that have been used recently in two high-profile cases. Number one being the Daybell and Ballo case up in Rexburg, Idaho, where they used satellite imagery to identify that Chad Daybell had a large pit in the back of his home dug and a backhoe. So naturally, that led FBI to go there with a warrant, and they dug in that same spot and they recovered both of the two missing children. So we're using satellite technology in this case, hoping to identify a color and perhaps even a make and model of the creeper guy that was described by Kylen and Crystal as being weird and having bizarre behavior camped next to them. The other technology that we're using is social media. We know that in the Gabby Petito case, social media video from bloggers came forward and they identified not only eyewitnessing Brian Laundrie, but they also observed in the Red, White, and Bethune video, they saw Gabby Petito's van along the stretch of road of Spread Creek, and so that led officers where to search for Gabby Petito's body, and we know that within 24 hours they found her body on the other side of Spread Creek. So that's what we're trying to do here is if we get a color, make, and or model from a sky view of our suspect, we're hoping that these people that were down there exploring Moab, if they had dash cam video, GoPro cameras, off-road cameras of their activities down in Moab, especially in the area of LaSalle Road Loop, we're hoping that they'll come forward with any raw footage so we can see if we can identify the car of the suspect and even get a plate from them passing by either on the road or someone parked along the side of the road. There's not much activity there, but they're going to be driving through that area.
Interesting. So break this down for our audience, Jason, in terms of give everybody a high level flyby on what you guys have eliminated, what if you can, right, without compromising your investigation, what you've eliminated, what you've kind of put into the box, what's maybe up on the board, but what are you specifically looking for? And then I want to talk about any physical evidence that you might be searching for, video, that kind of stuff. So
Sure.
Give us a rundown on that.
Sure. When I came on board, the father of Kylen, Jean-Paul Schulte, he had opened in the park for the local community to come by what he called was a clue booth. And every day for 2 to 4 hours, he'd be in the park taking in information from people all around the community that either was aware of somebody acting bizarre, was aware of somebody leaving town, people that even the crazy person on the mountain. So everybody, and as anyone following this case knows, including Brian Laundrie, we know that Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito were in Moab on the 12th. We know that Kylen and Crystal were murdered somewhere between the end of the day of August 13th, so midnight of August 14th, to 5:30 in the morning on August 15th. So if they were still in town, meaning Brian and Gabby, people are wondering if he's a potential suspect. And I have to say, given the fact of what happened to Gabby, he has to be on our suspect list until he's eliminated.
Okay. And yeah, now, in your opinion, then, you're not calling him a suspect. You're saying he's on a potential list as a person
Yes.
of interest. Is that what you would be saying?
That is correct. He's one of 17 persons of interest that now we're trying to vet, eliminate, or verify that, they're higher on the list.
Okay. So who would be some other potential persons or vehicles? You mentioned a blue Kia. I haven't heard much about the blue Kia. Help us understand that.
Well, the Kia was actually Kylen and Crystal's vehicle. So
Okay.
we're trying to identify who the creeper dude is, what his vehicle was. So once we have an idea what vehicle that was from a satellite image, then we can identify, eliminate anybody that didn't have that same kind of car.
Okay. Okay. And these two wonderful women they're basically out on their honeymoon, aren't they? Or they were most recently married, and they're out just minding their own business. And one of the women sends a message to some friends. Tell us about that message.
Well, the message that circulates around the internet is slightly different than the actual message itself.
Okay.
Yeah. So Kylen and Crystal had recently gotten married. They were considered newlyweds. Similar to what Gabby Petito wanted to do, living in the van life. They had a van. They had a tent. They were living out in the wilderness, but they still had jobs downtown. Crystal worked at McDonald's, and Kylen worked at the Moonflower Co-op, where Gabby and Brian had their little initial altercation that led to a 911 call.
So it's the same place. It's the same place.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of circumstantial situations that connect them, but that doesn't mean that you're guilty of a crime. There's only one main street. There's only a couple of grocery stores. The chances are everybody's been there. So really, being such a small town, it's less of a coincidence than one would imagine if it's like downtown New York or something.
Okay, so the time frame that you're interested in, maybe kind of like folks driving by and finding Gabby's van.
Pretty much.
What vehicle would you want the world to know about? We've got it's growing by the second here, but there's almost 2,400 people here now, and it's the word's getting out that you're here talking about this, and Francine is here going to be talking in depth about some additional DNA stuff. What's the word you want to get out to the world that potentially could help you? And then give me a phone number that they could call, and I'm going to create a banner below here.
What we want the world to be focused on is the fact that Moab is a visitor destination from all around the world. So it's not like we're only talking to locals. We're talking to people that are visiting, that are going to have dash cam and GoPro cam, things that while they're off-road enjoying themselves down south of Moab, near the LaSalle Loop Road, and anywhere near there. So, we're talking Warner Lake, we're talking Porcupine Rim, we're talking Uwa Lakes, that whole region there south of Moab. So if they had any video, any raw footage at all between August 11th and August 15th, we would beg for them to share it with us. It'll be completely anonymous. If it's not useful, it'll be destroyed. There's nothing that we're trying to embarrass anybody or publish, against their wishes. We're looking for videos, or they can even do a little bit of work themselves and just send us screenshots of vehicles. They don't have to even send us the whole raw footage, but I'm just trying to make it easy for them. But we want images of vehicles, people around those vehicles. Ideally, if there's a plate number, then we can give any leads to law enforcement if that vehicle that they're depicting in their footage matches what we're going to hopefully observe from an aerial satellite image. Once they're on order, we're just waiting for them to come in as well.
Okay, what's a contact point, phone number or email address that they can reach out to you?
Sure, I'll give you both. It's my cell phone number is 801-759-2248. They can easily Google Jason Jensen PI. You'll get the number just about anywhere on the web. Meanwhile, my email address is jason@jenseninvestigations.com.
Okay. Hang on. All right. So I've got Kylen. I want to make sure I spell their name right. Schulte and Crystal.
Yeah, Kylen Schulte and
Okay.
Crystal Turner.
And Crystal Turner. Okay. So I'm going to put this up right now, guys. If anybody has any information, go ahead and hit those numbers. You see them now going across the screen. Okay. And while we're in this program tonight, I'm going to keep that going. So if anybody has any information, hit Jason up on that. So let's shift gears back into Francine for a second. Francine, what are your thoughts in relationship? What would LE be looking for if they have physical evidence, on these two, poor victims here? What do you think they would be looking for?
They're going to be looking for DNA, for sure, and depending, because depending on what was at the scene, because when I do cases and I help with cases, I look at the scene photographs. And in looking at the scene photographs, I can make a determination as to what I believe would be the most probative evidence to start with and then work our way down. And so from what Jason is saying, there were several rounds fired. And so therefore, certainly shell casings. I don't know all the details of the case, but I do believe that anything that the suspect may have touched, and when you look at a case and you see how clothing is on a person or how they are, and their hands, was their defense wounds, was there things like this, you want to start working in those areas where the suspect has had contact with. And so that's what they're going to be looking for. Fingerprints are important, but in this case, it's my understanding that they lived in a van and they also camped, out. And it's also my understanding that Gabby and Brian did van living and perhaps camped out as well. And so there was some commonalities here. And so they're going to be looking for specific on, the women on Schulte and Turner. If we assume this is a male suspect, they're going to be looking for male DNA. And we can't always just assume it's a male, because I have had cases where they were for sure it was a male and it ended up being a female shooter. And so, you've got to be careful on your evidence and what you've collected and what you're going to process. That's going to be very important. I do want to say something, though, I think is very important. And Jason, I want you to know how much I appreciate you working with the family. Oftentimes families are kind of left out and they don't know what's going on. And I think it's wonderful you're doing this. Families are important and they do need someone on their side, and they do need answers. And I think that's great. So thank you, Jason. I think that's really good. But again, the evidence on as far as the Turner Schulte case, if I could see the photos and I could give them a good idea, of what I would do for sure.
Yeah,
I would hope that someone contacts you to test the shell casings because of your award-winning Bardole method, We know that there were shell casings left at the crime scene, and somebody even left one shell casing on Sean Paul Schulte's table, a casing of a 9mm. So we're hoping that that was something that they, this person found at the crime scene and collected and brought to Sean Paul, but we don't know that. So I don't know what the rounds were or the type of gun that was used, but to me, that seemed to convey a message to him. Right. Hey, I found this at the crime scene.
Well, and that's really true. And here's the thing: Moab doesn't usually have this sort of stuff happen.
No,
and this is something that with rural communities, I really want to get the word out on the shell casings, because they don't hear a lot about this. And I really want these rural communities to know that I am available to contact, and I am available to help them if they have questions. I really think it's so important, because here's what usually happens. They'll collect the shell casings and they will give them to their state lab, and their state lab will process them for fingerprints using a fuming method. They'll swab them for DNA, but by the time that's done, I can't do it. And when they enter it into the database for shell casings, most places don't use gloves, and so there's cross-contamination. So I need to get those casings before you send it to anybody else, because I can at least get some DNA off of them, and the NIBIN can say where the firearm is being used in a certain area, according to their database. So I really need to get the word out that not to send them to a lab for this type of processing until I can use my method on it. And my method will not destroy tool marks. It will not destroy the shell casing or rust it. They can have them right back in great shape and do what they need to with it. And Moab it's a rural community. They don't run into this sort of thing. And I think law enforcement is doing actually the best they can, because these rural communities just do not know all the technologies that are out there. And they, and that's what we want to help them have knowledge on and be able to make the best choices for their evidence.
Yeah, interesting. And Brian, or excuse me, Jason, everybody's, they've hammered me 3 times. So third time's the charm. Did I get your info right down below, buddy?
Yes.
Okay, finally. And thank you everybody in chat for keeping me, on the straight and narrow. I was trying to type and listen at the same time. So anyway, we got it right. So that is a really solid point about the shell casing as a whole. And explain to our viewers, Francine, just what NIBIN is. Everybody thinks there's, a lot of magic here. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, so you have a fingerprint database, okay, and it was called the APHIS database, but they changed the name. I forgot what it is now, but it was APHIS for fingerprints. Right. For DNA, you have the CODIS database. And for shell casings, what they can do is they can look at how the firing pin hit the shell casing and markings on the shell casings, tool marks, and they can make a determination what type of firearm it might have been fired from, if it matches, say, a firearm that they have. And it's a database that keeps track of all these shell casings and what type of firearm. For example, there was a case, a homicide case we did here in Utah. And we found that the firearm was being used in specific areas real close to each other. It was the same firearm. And so, but a lot of the shell casings, they didn't know about my method. So they'd send them to the lab, and then, they were, processed, and I couldn't do anything with them. So it's a database. NIBIN is a national database for shell casings.
Yeah, and it's imperative. Why is it? Well, what's the critical point of why it should come through the Bardole method first, versus getting stuck in the lab and then thrown under a microscope, right?
Right. Well, first of all, you can't have any cross-contamination. That ruins your case. You can't do that. You can't process things that somebody else has touched. Secondly, they fume they'll swab the casings, hoping to get some DNA, and they fume the casings with like a super glue fuming, and that doesn't ruin the DNA. But after they fume it, they'll either use a dye stain or they'll dust it for fingerprints. And so, a lot of stuff has been done to that shell casing. And then it goes, they don't use gloves usually when they put things into NIBIN, nor do they clean out the area where you put it into the slot so you can take the photograph of the shell casing. So it's so important that I get it first, because I can hopefully tell you who did it, and NIBIN can tell you where these shootings are taking place.
Yeah, it's a win-win on
Yeah,
both sides of the.
it is. It
both sides
really
of the
is.
coin.
And one thing is, there's other places that have come up with ways to try to get DNA. They use chemicals, they use different methods, but I don't use any of that. So they're in great shape when they get them back. And it's the same with the firearms. The same thing with firearms. I do specific parts of the firearm. I have the law enforcement agency take the firearm apart and send me specific parts of the firearm, and that works just as well. So it's just really important that they know that this is available and they're not at a loss.
Yeah, very important. And thank you.
Yeah.
It's so relevant. That information is so relevant. Jason, question for you. Give us, if you can, kind of give us when our girls go missing here. And by the way, the interview room is going to pick this case up. We're going to stay alongside you. So you have an open platform here to get information out to the public. Okay, that is a commitment we're going to make to you tonight, because I got to be honest with you, I've got the best subscribers and some of the smartest people on top of these things. And if you're watching the chat, they're going already trying to put BL in the circle or out of the circle.
Yeah, I've been watching that they're really trying to make the case of Brian Laundrie, and
Yeah.
some of it's compelling, really, because once you weigh one side of the equation, all the circumstantial evidence, it sounds like it's a probable scenario. But given the fact that they had that police encounter on the 12th, if they actually honored their word to stay separated the entire time until the 13th, I would imagine the first thing they did on the 13th is get out of town. Number one, because that's just human, that's just the human reaction to having a close call with being arrested. They don't want to risk being arrested the following day or something. So I would imagine that they got out of town, unless somebody can prove to me that they were in town. And there's plenty of eyewitnesses that placed them in Jackson Hole, at the Mary Piglets, and other places. So if someone can place Brian Laundrie and Gabby Petito in Moab on the 14th and the 15th of August, I'm willing to listen. But I would think that they got out of town, number one. Number two, the crimes were committed completely differently. We have Kylen and Crystal were shot, whereas Brian, if he did this, which, heck, he's a suspect in my mind, Gabby was strangled. There's no mistake about it. That's already been a finding by the the Teton County coroner, Brent Blue. So the crimes were committed differently. So it's not like the serial killer has a signature that's popping up coming in all these murders. So the other thing that rules out Brian Laundrie in my mind is the fact that it's 2 days later, they're in Salt Lake, so clearly they're still not hanging around on, I've heard some stories that they were still in town on the 18th when they were discovered, Kylen and Crystal, and that's just not the case, given the fact that we know that the small window that this murder occurred, the murders of Kylen and Crystal occurred, was midnight at the end of August 13th to the wee early hours of August 15th. The bulk of the 14th is all that we're looking at. So if Brian Laundrie was out of town on the 14th, then he's not the suspect. He's not the murderer.
So you would need evidence that puts him in the environment, and or at least puts him close to, the opportunity to commit this particular crime.
Right, and
if he was in the go ahead.
Right, and given the fact that I have a list of 17, I have a stronger case against couple other people than Brian Laundrie, but that information I can't reveal at this time, because the last thing what you want to do is utter names and then they bogey out of town, and then it doesn't look like they're leaving town because of guilty conscience. It looks like they're leaving town because they're, in their mind, they're being falsely accused.
Right,
It doesn't help
right.
law enforcement
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah, we don't want that. We don't want any of that. So let's go back to shifting gears just for a second here. So let's talk about some of the DNA that in Gabby's case, Francine. Some of the, obviously, the news reports have, and some of the search warrants have indicated, they've gone to different houses, gathered, it sounds like, some DNA evidence as well. What type of stuff would be significant now that we know the cause of death? Manual strangulation, right? Throttling, and what folks, if you're not familiar what that means, throttling is basically just using the hands, the arms, the knee, any type of physical weight on the neck here and the carotid. And what you want to do is you want to cut both of the blood circulation and the air circulation off simultaneously. And it's a vicious, personal, vicious attack from suspect to victim. And there are a lot of studies on males who strangle women in domestic problems. So I said this months ago, or about a month ago, when this whole thing went down. That one picture of him holding her by the neck in Zion, that was a huge clue for me that day. And you can go back and watch the video I did on that. And I said that is not a good sign. And obviously, it's now turned out to be definitely what the problem was. So, why is this significant in terms of talk about the shedder again? If Brian or whoever hypothetically is a shedder, what significance would you be able to get DNA and a body out in the elements as long as this poor girl has been? Can you get it still? Can you get it?
Well, I learned my lesson a long time ago when it came to this type of thing. I in 2004, I attended they called it the Body Farm, but it's a National Forensic Academy. And body decomposition, it happens depending on the area of the country, how it will, like in Utah, it's a very dry state, so you mummify more. In Tennessee, it's very humid, and a body, has a whole different type of decomposition. But I would say, number one, when it comes to DNA with Gabby, she's going to have a lot of Brian's DNA because they traveled in the same car and they touched each other a lot, probably in the clothing, and they were all in this closed environment in the van or wherever. So we expect that his DNA will be on her clothing. And you can't say, well, because it's on her clothing, you're guilty. However, I don't know what the temperature was when she was found. That would be very significant. So how when her body was found, what condition was it in? Okay. Now I had a case that I wished I'd have done this, and this is how you learn: is you look at what happened and you figure out next time I'm going to do this. We had a body that had been out there, and it didn't look that bad. But the one thing I wished I would have done is the rule here in Utah and most places is we have medical examiners. Some places have a coroner. But the rule is the body belongs to the medical examiner and the evidence belongs to law enforcement. And so we don't touch the body because it belongs to the medical examiner. However, in a case like strangulation, in a case where there's domestic, what are the odds of someone's DNA being around your neck? So I wish I would have swabbed that neck prior to the body being moved, before anybody touched it. I wouldn't have changed the body position or anything like that, but I would have swabbed in that area to see if there was DNA left behind. And if they happen to be a shedder, then eureka, you're going to get good DNA. I do know the MVAC has been used on skin, but I think, you know, it's something you can take it to a crime scene, but you can also do with your swabs. I mean, just swabbing, you know, in those areas. That's just good evidence to say, you know, why is his DNA on her neck? And I would also take other areas, you know, maybe down around, you know, in other areas to see, is his DNA down further, or is it just mostly on the neck? And that would be really something I would do. As far as the clothing, that's going to be really hard. But I saw someone, I don't know all the evidence they have, so I haven't been made privy, you know, to this. But someone had mentioned there were boots or something found by Gabby's body. I don't know that, but say that there was some evidence that didn't belong, you know, to Gabby, that's left there by her body. If it were Brian's boots, why are they there? So you definitely want to take those boots, and you definitely want to see, you know, just think how much you sweat when you wear boots. There's going to be some good DNA on the inside of those boots. And so why are his boots there? You know, and so that's something, you know, certainly doesn't say for sure, but it's really good. You know, why are they there? Did somebody put them on and take her there? You know, what is the reason for them being there? Again, fingernails, I think, would be good, because I don't know if she had any defense wounds. You know, if somebody, you know, was strangling me, I'd probably dig my fingernails in. I'd probably try to grab them and do whatever I could to get them off of me if I wasn't unconscious. And I would think that would also be some good evidence under the fingernails, because I've done a lot of fingernails with my method. And, you know, a lot of places will either clip the fingernails or scrape them or swab them. And I don't know, you know, who does what, you know, but if you clip the fingernails, one of the things we've run into is there have been places that don't use sterile fingernail clippers. So you got to make sure they're one-time use. And so there's a lot of things you have to look at, but definitely I would have, you know, if it was freezing cold where she was at, and I'm assuming that's a pretty cold area. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. You know, exactly what it was like. If I could see the terrain, if I could see the body, if I could see what it looked like, I would have definitely, you know, put some concentration on those areas. The fingernails, looking at the hands to see if there was any defense wounds or something like that.
Yeah, and you're 4 weeks into it, so you're still going to have skin tissue. It's not going to be a total decomposition.
No, and don't forget, skin cells, they're pretty tough. And the skin
Yeah.
cell holds the DNA. Inside that skin cell is DNA. And so after I get the skin cells onto a filter, then I send it to a lab where a DNA expert can lyse, is called breaking open the cell. It's called lysing, who let that DNA come out so that they can process it. And skin cells can last for a long time.
Yeah, they do. And we're gonna come back to the body farm here in a second, because that
They hate it
place
being
is,
called that, but that's what everybody knows it is. So
yeah. Well, we'll come back to it for a second. I'm gonna take a note here, because I think our viewers will find that place absolutely fascinating to hear about. And it's in Middle Tennessee, so it's a famous place, and
yep.
it's pretty cool. So, but I want to get back to the girls for a second, back to Crystal and Kylen. So they reported this creepy guy, right? Or somebody creepy near them, and it's reported in the news. And maybe you can clarify with facts what exactly was being, you know, how was this person intimidating them?
Well, that's where, you know, social media and the news have kind of gotten things a little distorted. There's plenty of stories out there that it was reported Kylen or Crystal said, you know, this creepy guy's scaring us, and if we end up dead, we were murdered. That's not true. It was more along the lines that we're way out here, you know, at bear camp. If we don't show up for work, come look for us. So it was just simply identifying where they're at. It wasn't because they would end up dead, but they were, as far as the creepy guy goes, there was conversation about, oh, great, he just came back with more clothes and food. We're going to have to move.
Okay.
So so obviously someone out there has taken the liberty of combining the two and meaning, oh, we're going to be in danger. That's not entirely the case, because certainly if they thought their life was in danger, they probably would have moved a lot sooner.
Okay, so factual now, we're hearing it, folks. If you're just joining us, Jason Jensen is the lead PI and investigator on the Kylen Schulte and Crystal Turner homicides in Moab, on or about the same time our other, victim, Gabby, and person of interest, Brian, were out and about. But he has about a list of 17 individuals that he's going through that are all on his top priority play. One of the girls' fathers had set up a clue booth there and was very consistent with, I just love these parents that, and I understand that feeling. I lost a child, so I get the fact of what it's like to want to know. Okay, to want to know. My son passed away in 2003. So this is kind of why I'm passionate about, some of the things that I get involved in. And, but this dad, he just had this brilliant idea, no questions asked, just drop your information in, and he's passed it on. And now you have picked those reins up for him, and God bless you, for doing that, my friend, because I know you, I've done a little homework on you, and you're a bulldog, and you will definitely find results. This is a perfect example tonight. Here you are asking the world. So for our folks that are just joined us, Jason, give them a little insight in what you're looking for and what lane you're going down, so that folks can start providing you direct information.
Sure. Again, what we're hoping that your audience could do is, if any of them were in the Moab area or know someone that was in the Moab area between August 11th and August 15th, and they had any raw video at all in Moab, south of Moab, particularly along the LaSalle Loop Road, or the surrounding camp areas, Warner Lake, Uwa Lake, Porcupine Rim, which happened to be one of the places that Gabby Petito identified on the Dirt app that they wanted to go visit. Well, that's along the edge of that part of the Mesa Flat. So if they have any video of anyone behind them or vehicles, especially vehicles, because vehicles have the tendency to have a license plate where we can identify its registered owner. So we want any footage of any vehicles, any individuals in their footage that they got while they were down here visiting in the Moab area.
Yeah, and for clarity, you've been retained by the family.
Yes, I am actually working for the family, and it's not just me sticking my nose into the case. I'm actually working for the Schulte family.
Right, and you're working in conjunction, hand in hand, communicating with law enforcement and the authorities as well. Any information or evidence that's obviously, criminal nature, you're returning over. So I think that
any leads that we get, once we vet them, we hand them over to law enforcement. Correct.
Right. But you guys also have, the cool thing about what you're able to do is kind of like YouTube, right? I mean, we don't have Miranda anymore. Okay, so if somebody wants to call me and say something, I pick up the phone and say hello. Whereas before, we had to, be careful, right? So anyway, that's it. When the women were last seen, where were they last seen, and what time and date was that?
Sure. On Friday, August 13th, they went to Woody's Tavern. That's well known in the news. Anyone that's researched the case knows that they were at Woody's Tavern that night. What most people don't know is, after leaving Woody's Tavern, they went to a friend's house. They were at the friend's house, a couple with children, so nothing nefarious about that. They went to a friend's house until about midnight. So By the time they got to camp, it was after midnight on the morning of Saturday, August 14th. So if they were confronted with their attacker at that point, then it happened right after midnight, after midnight at the early hours of August 14th. Otherwise, could have happened anywhere within the 24-hour cycle of Saturday, August 14th, up to the morning, 5:30 in the morning on Sunday, August 15th, because they were no call, no show to work that morning. Both of them had 6 o'clock shifts. And then they were no call, no show again on Monday, the 16th. So at that point, employers were getting upset and nervous, wondering what's happening. They called Jean-Paul Schulte, Kylen's father. And, at that point on the 17th, there was a missing persons report placed.
Interesting. Any indication that this is a hate crime?
I don't see it yet, because if you're familiar with Moab, they're very loving, generous. There's no, sects here of, skinheads or anything like that. Everybody in the community, it's a small community, less than 10,000 people. Kylen and Crystal lived here for so many years. Everybody loved them. So there's no indication of a hate crime whatsoever. And if it's a visitor, they wouldn't necessarily know that they were a lesbian couple. So, it is what it is. And I don't think it's a hate crime.
Yeah.
But we're not going to know until we identify the suspect identify the nature of, what makes him tick. If he's got postings online that he hates LGBTQ, then obviously that's something there. But I don't see it yet.
Yeah, definitely keep that on the plate. Just my opinion. I mean, at this point, there's so much craziness towards folks,
right? But
it's never.
But it's
but
never
we
healthy
don't
to make that. It's never healthy to make that your central theme. It's like having tunnel vision against a suspect. You're having tunnel vision against a motive, so you're trying to find someone to fit your scenario. And it's never wise to have tunnel vision for any reason on investigating such a horrific crime.
Yeah,
one of the things that would be good, and I'm sure Moab's probably moving in this direction, is when you look at the crime scene photos, a profiler could probably do very well at making a determination if this person, this was a crime of opportunity. What type of, was it just so disarrayed that they didn't know what they were doing and it was just trying to get everything done? Profiling would really help on something like this, to be able to look at that. So I think that's something that that would be looked at. Another thing I did want to bring up, though, is if in fact, say, Brian was involved in anything, that certainly if there were any male DNA on, say, the women's clothing on Turner or Schulte, if there was any male DNA on any of that MVAC, I'll tell you, it gets more DNA than anything. And we have software that can unmix mixtures, and we can pull out the male portion of the DNA. That would be such great evidence, because I know there's got to be, I don't know if it's a male or a female, but it's sounding to me like it's male. Wouldn't you say, Jason?
Oh, yeah. It definitely has the overtones of being a male attacker, given the fact that they were found pantless. They were just wearing T-shirts. So there was widespread speculation that they were victims of sexual assault as well. Okay. However, given the fact that they're potentially were dragged out of bed, I'm more inclined to think that they went to bed just wearing T-shirts. So,
and it might have been very warm or whatever, but I have to agree. So you would want, my concern is wherever that evidence is, that they use the MVAC. It doesn't have to be through me. I just have more experience than anyone in the United States.
I agree.
But I really wish that they would
think
out and use that.
Yes, and if you've just joined us, you are talking to Francine Bardole, who invented the Bardole Method for using the MVAC for touch DNA. And she actually discovered it first on shell casings, but it can be used from anything. And which leads me to another thought, shifting gears back over to Gabby for a second. If there are other items utilized as potential, right now we know that manual strangulation is definitely in play, but there could be other scenarios where items could have been moved to cover the body, like branches, like rocks, anything.
Yeah,
so let's talk about that. Tell us about that. Where could you go with that type of evidence?
Heaven's sakes, there's so much to go with. So depending, like I said, I haven't seen the photos, but depending how the body was found and what's around it, we've gotten, using the MVAC, you can get DNA off of rocks, depending on the size of the rocks. If it's a small,
how do you do that? How do you do that?
Okay, the MVAC. So for people that don't know, the MVAC, and you can go to MVAC systems, and they can look at a video how it works. But it's like a little mini nozzle. Think of your carpet cleaner. If anyone, I'm sure people here have cleaned their carpets. And so what happens is it's a little nozzle that sprays out a buffer solution or a sterile water onto the item of evidence. And it soaks into the pores or the weave of the clothing or the porous surfaces of a rock or wood or whatever, and it loosens up those skin cells that are hooked in there, and it sucks them up with a vacuum, just like your carpet cleaner. You suck up that water and it goes into the container. This buffer solution is sucked up and it goes into a sterile bottle, and all those skin cells are floating in that water that's in that bottle. And you take that solution and you pour it through a filter that captures the skin cells. That filter has such small pores in it that it can capture the skin cells. And then you let that filter dry and you send it to the lab so that they can get the DNA off the filter and do DNA testing on it. It is phenomenal. The FBI has done research on this, and it collects more DNA than anything. And it's just phenomenal how much DNA it can get. And so some labs will say, oh, it gets too much DNA and we can't have that much. Well, what do you want? The right amount? Let's make things perfect. Okay. That's not going to happen. They have software that can unmix the mixtures. They have software that can separate them. They can take the male DNA out of everything, and you can match it up, and you can match up to suspects or victims or whatever. And the MVAC is something that I when I first saw it, I think it might have been 2000, I don't know, 12, 13, I can't remember when I first saw it, but it was phenomenal, and I knew it was before its time, and now it's proving to be such a wonderful forensic tool. And it's used for touch DNA. You can look up on the MVAC, if you go to the MVAC website and you go to the tab that says, I believe it says articles, and then it says news, it'll talk about all the cases it's done. And it did the Crystal Blasanovich case, which a rock was used to kill her, to bash in her head, and it was left there at the scene. And years later, this was in the 90s, and years later, they used the MVAC on it, Summit County Police or Sheriff's Office, and they were able to get the MVAC they were able to use the MVAC on the rock. It was back then, it was through Sorensen Forensic, and they got the suspect's DNA after all these years. And I'm just saying, it works on anything that's porous, any porous surface, it works.
Wow, that is so cool.
And if it's really small, then I use my method on it. So there are some branches that are too small and round that the nozzle won't work. So I have to break down those little pieces, and I use my method on it. But there's just so much that can be done.
Wow. And you can draw it off of any type of porous surface. What about a branch? What about a tree branch or something to that effect? Could you utilize it on that? Let's say the suspect covers a body, and can you pull it off of a tree branch?
Oh, sure. So I have had cases where they've tried to cover a body with a sapling, cutting down. They don't bring a big saw with them to cut down big trees, so they usually use smaller branches. But in that case, Certainly you can use the MVAC if you could put them together to get a good suction. If not, then I use a sterile tool and I just cut them into pieces and I'll use my method. And I've done that on truck bed liners that Blue Star, which will glow with for blood. I've had to cut truck bed liner up in the area where it glowed so I could use my method. The MVAC couldn't get in between the little grooves of the liner. So there's all sorts of ways you can do stuff. There just is. You've just got to ask. I mean, you can call Jason. Jason's really well informed on things as far as DNA and stuff, and he does a really good job on looking at stuff. And you can also when you give my website, they can go ahead and they can send me a note or whatever if they have a question. I'm not just here I'm here to help people know what's out there. And so, and the MVAC website just has so much information on it that will really give them an idea of what is they're capable of doing.
Okay, so we got a couple of things, a couple of questions that came up. First one is why are men killing their wives and girlfriends? And boy, if we had that answer, we would not. We'd be out of everything that we're doing here, out of everything. But that is a great comment. And the second, the keys are keys that belong to the women. Cars, have they been recovered, or are you in a position to discuss that?
Well, I think what they're referring to is there was a set of keys that were found at the crime scene subsequent to the scene being cleared by law enforcement. So there was wide speculation that maybe the keys belonged to the killer. Even someone saying to me at some point in this last couple of weeks that maybe the keys belonged to Brian Laundrie, so he had to fly back to Florida to get another set of keys. Fortunately, the key is no longer an issue. They identified who the keys belonged to, and he was camping at that spot on the 20th after the scene was cleared. He was unaware that it was even a murder crime scene, but he camped there. I mean, it's the wilderness. You don't expect there to be a crime scene. So he left a set of keys, but it wasn't like a car key. It had a couple gym keys on it. And they researched, the symbols on the keys and found out from the owner of the gym who it belonged to. Contact was made to him, and he's just some guy in Texas that was going back home at that point.
And welcome to the 21st century and the power of social media today, the power of social media. Here's a question for you, Francine, is can I ask how many years back can you go with your technology? Adele asked that, and thank you.
You can go pretty far back. I'm working on cases. There have been cases that have been 30, 40 years old, that they can get DNA from. What they're coming up with now as far as DNA technology is new technologies that work well with degraded DNA, because DNA does degrade over time, but they're getting better with the technologies that can work with degraded DNA. But you can go, like I said, skin cells are pretty tough. And especially if they're embedded in a porous surface or a weave, because that helps protect them a little bit. And so, you can go quite a ways back, and you'll be doing a lot of reading, on the media where they've solved cases that are 30, 40, 50 years old. It just depends on the technology you use. But the number where you start with everything has got to be the evidence. And you want to make sure you've collected the evidence. And then once you have the evidence, then you need to know, how are we going to process the evidence? What's the best technology? And then once you do that, then you have to decide, where are we going to send this technology or this DNA for DNA testing? So, it's kind of a pronged approach.
Yeah, a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
Jason, this one's for you. Is do you think there could be two killers involved in your case?
Well, clearly, for instance, if there was two different guns used and two different angles of bullet trajectory in the victims, then you can make the case that there was two shooters, or more if there's more angles, more shots. The situation that I understand is it appears to be only a one attacker, and why I state that is, I'm training in crime scene reconstruction, and one of the things that we do know is that one victim is located close to the camp, and then the second victim was further away, as if having to be chased down. So the signs to me sound like a single shooter, and he was, putting down each victim one at a time. But I would think that the real question would be answered from, the state crime lab once they identify which gun. Well, if there was more than one gun, that would indicate that there was more than one shooter.
So I have a question. Are you able to tell us in what sequence the victims were, who was taken out first?
I see no harm in revealing that. It
Okay.
appears that Kylen was murdered first, and then Crystal was chased down and murdered second.
Okay. So let's shift gears for a second, okay? And then we're gonna come back, okay? But I want to get in the Suzanne Morphew. So what I'm just interested in, so there was testimony and evidence presented in the recent trial of Barry, or the prelim, where they bound him over for first degree. But the defense raised an issue about some unknown partial or similar to DNA to a couple of registered sex offenders, or private or previous sex offenders. And I asked Francine if she would just kind of dive in for a second, and without having all of the evidence in front of her, okay, but simultaneously, what exactly does that mean?
Well,
when that happens.
a partial profile, depending on how much DNA there was, and so a partial profile. Let me use an example. In the Angie Dodge murder case out of Idaho Falls, they had a full profile of the suspect from the get-go, and it never matched anyone in the CODIS database, which is often the case in older cases, because they didn't have the database, or they weren't collecting DNA from people at that time. Our DNA was just brand new, but they did enter this profile of the known suspect into the Ancestry DNA database, and they came up with the last name, and that last name had a almost a really good match to this. To the last name was Ussery, and so it matched this other fellow by the name of Ussery. And they were for sure it was him, because there was such, almost all these alleles or little pieces of the DNA matched, except for just 2 or 3, I think. And he seemed like the best suspect, because he did murderabilia movies, and this has got to be him. And then they brought him in, and he has that, I think it's Michael Ussery, and he's on YouTube as well, but it turned out not to be him. So, a partial profile, they can say they can't exclude him, but there could be, it could be. So when you have a partial profile, you just don't want to hang your coat up and say, oh, that's the person, because in this case, it turned out not to be him. And so you got to be careful. And it could, what I said is, I don't know how much this partial profile was, how much did it match? But, that's a good lead. I mean, that's a good lead to start following, definitely. But in reading on this case, there was some evidence that I thought was really interesting. Now, again, husband and wife. Okay, so you're going to share DNA. Your DNA is going to be all over the house, all over them, and everything else. But there was a few things that I was interested in that I found really kind of, strange, like the tranquilizer gun, and empty darts, and a cap in the dryer. Why is that in the dryer? Okay. And a tranquilizer gun. Why do you got a tranquilizer gun? I would think, now, I don't know if those were just hidden there, because I've been on crime scenes where they just put things in the washing machine or they put them in the dryer. Doesn't mean they washed them or it means they dried them. But that would be interesting to use my method on those darts. Was her DNA on any of those? Was any of her DNA on there? And, these were empty darts. So I'd want to know. The other one, they said they saw her as her bike was down some sort of ravine or something, and her helmet was about a mile away. So that sounds like it was tossed as you're driving or something like that. And I would be interested to know. Now, a bike, sure, maybe he touched a lot, but I don't know if everybody touches each other's helmet on the inside or not. I don't know, but that would certainly be worth checking out. And then, of course, there was other things that, not for DNA. It was more, like the spy pen, iPhones, laptop, Kindle, things like that. But again, I didn't see the pictures. I don't know. I do want to offer caution on this, though, because there are a lot of people who have been. Christopher Tapp on the Angie Dodge case is another one. He was charged with her murder. He spent 20 years in prison, and he turned out not to be the person. So you don't want to just say, oh, okay, it's this person. There's a lot of people in prison that are innocent. Believe it or not, there's a lot. I can't remember the percentage was like 5% or something like that, which is like 100,000, something really big. So I'm just saying you've got to be careful, but you need to take everything all together, and you need to put that together and see, what you have, the circumstantial evidence, the physical evidence, everything.
So this evidence that the defense is presenting, in your opinion, is it possible it can be just, how does it get there, right? I mean, could it be just pieces of shedding of maybe a mechanic, or I mean, there's 1,000 ways that it could have gotten there.
Think of your own car. Think of your own car.
It goes to this question down here. It goes to this question even with Grey Wolf. I'm just wondering what happens when people buy a lot of secondhand furniture, stars, or stuff, even cars. That's a theory. That's a solid theory.
Yeah. Oh, that definitely is. So when you think of your car, I mean, I take my car in and I get them, they fix it. They do things. I have people that get in and out of my car. And I don't know how old this car was where they found this partial. It could have been a mechanic. It could have been somebody that maybe, I don't know if they had any vehicle burglaries. It could have been somebody that touched them. You don't know. You have to take it all into consideration. Now, if you had a strong suspect, and you had the means, swabbing is mostly how they'll go ahead and get the DNA off, say, the glove box. Now, the glove box, depending on the make and model of the car, is it textured? Would that be something we would probably want to use the MVAC on? Because you can get more DNA. Think about when you swab, how much are you picking up? Are you getting into little crevices? Are you getting into that the button that you push on? What are you doing? And so if there's all of that you've got to take into consideration. Swabbing can be really difficult because you have to make sure when you're swabbing that you're swabbing and you're turning that swab around so you're getting even amounts of DNA on that swab, because when the lab cuts that swab, I hope they're getting the part that has the most DNA so they can get a good profile. And I don't think that we're really trained to how we have to swab. We just swab and then turn it in. And they have to make a decision where they're going to cut that portion of the swab, because half that swab has to go for defense, the other half for prosecution. So you want to make sure that, you're swabbing, and getting enough. So on that glove box, I would probably revisit that glove box. I'd probably take it off the hinges. I would probably sand that place where they swabbed, and I'd try to get more DNA to see if you got a better profile instead of a partial.
You hear that, CBI? Send it over to, Francine's lab and see if there's other potential evidence
Yeah.
there potentially. So okay, so now let's take some Q&A. And Jason, I want to give you an opportunity, to tell folks maybe something that I haven't asked you, about where the investigation is so far, and where you would like to take it. But then let's open it up. Are you guys still good for some questions from folks
Sure.
about?
Sure.
Okay. So, guys, let's go ahead and I'll try to put as many as I can, and if you guys can kind of will answer them, and that way we can get as many people as we can, in line here. Okay. So if you folks want to start putting questions up, and we'll go from here. How about that? All right. Let's see here. Why is the behavior panel taking so long? That's a great question. I don't know. Okay, good question here. Maui Girl has a question too. Divine visions, DNA evidence lost in water.
So are they saying if it gets wet, does that lose evidence?
Yeah.
Well, depends on how long it was in the water. Okay, number one. And is it on what type of material? Is it on wood? Is it on clothing? What is it on? Because the MVAC has had good results with stuff that has been in the water for quite a while of time, quite a long period of time. So no, I would say not all is lost, but you want to try. One thing that you have to remember, if it's wet, do not put it in plastic. Anything for DNA, no plastic. You dry it out first and you package it in paper. So dry that out so it can all be dried up and it doesn't get mold on it and it doesn't get destroyed, because anything wet, if you don't let it dry out, you can end up having mold on it, bacteria, all sorts of things.
Yeah, and I'll grab this one from Rocky. Barry has to go to probation office. Download each day his poor phone reception. Basically he's got to download his phone because he's got poor phone reception. This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life, to be honest with you. A guy who's out on first-degree murder, walking around with an ankle bracelet, and then he's in an area that has no reception, and he has to go into probation and download it. Are you serious? Yeah, I've never seen anything like it. And by the way, it's his birthday. So I'll just give you a heads up on that. So he's going to be a day older. But we're not here for that guy. He's got his coming. All right, so let's see what we've got here. Why would there be so little of Barry's DNA if there any reasonable explanation aside from cleaning? I guess that's anybody's guess. What do you think, Francine?
Well, it depends on how they were cleaning it. So I have I've gotten DNA where they thought they've really cleaned, because there's a lot of nooks and crannies in those. I mean, and that solution gets into that. They can try to clean it. They can think they've done a really good job, but depending on the evidence, there's been the argument of secondary transfer, which is possible as well, on DNA that say been washed with other things or whatever, and they've tried to get rid of stuff. They've still been able to get some DNA. So, a lot of people try to clean it up, but there's stuff that they've tried to clean things up in, and there's those seams or those nooks or those crannies or there's crevices or those little areas, screws or whatever, where they couldn't get, and we're able to get DNA from that.
Okay. Jason, that one's for you from Maui Girl. Were there keys found at the crime scene? I think you went over that, but maybe we can address it again.
I do think this is a repeat. It's very much been a fascination by the social media out there, so I don't mind repeating it and answer, because eventually it'll go away. There were keys found at the crime scene subsequent to the scene being cleared, so that's because that was another camper that used the space afterwards. So it was ruled out that the keys had anything to do with the crime.
Okay, and that one there is yours as well. What type of weapon, if you can reveal that?
That's probably something that we can't reveal. Obviously, if the bad guy who's still at large hears that oh, they found out my gun, he's going to ditch the gun. That doesn't help law enforcement.
Okay. Okay. This one's for you, Francine. After 3 or 4 weeks in the elements, can Brian's DNA be found on Gabby's remains?
And like I said, that would depend on the state of decomposition. And from, I think somebody said it was cold at night, 70 degrees in the day, and very cold at night. So it depends on what her body was like. But definitely, I think it would be protected under if she had jewelry, fingernails, things like that. Where she might have struggled for herself, getting. In fact, when I go to autopsies, we always get fingernail clippings, and that's really important. So there is that possibility. I would never say no, because I would definitely want to look and see exactly what was there.
Hey, here's another one for you, Francine. It says, it's addressed to me, but I think you're the expert here. Is there a reason that this way of collecting DNA is not a standard for LE? Well, that's what your lab's doing, right? I mean,
so I'm assuming you're talking about the MVAC or the Bardole method. The MVAC. Yes. Okay, here's my opinion on the MVAC. In my opinion, and in working with West Jordan City Police, it was a real benefit that we owned the MVAC, because we knew that case inside and out. We knew exactly what was found, and we knew how things looked, and I knew exactly where I was going to put my efforts with that MVAC. When you send it to a lab, hopefully you can disseminate that information to the lab. But here's the drawback for a state lab. It takes a lot of time to do an MVAC. It's not just something that you just do it. You have decomposition to work around. You might have blood. The evidence might be really old. There might be some mold on it. So it does take a lot of time, and state labs are inundated with cases. And so if they're taking all this time on a piece of evidence that, say is taken 2 or 3 hours, that's going to put them even further behind. So I think it's a real benefit for law enforcement to own their own MVAC, because it's something that they could really benefit, because they have all the knowledge, they have everything there, and a lab doesn't have that opportunity. They don't have all the information. You meet with them, you'll tell them what you do know, but you have the pictures. You are the one that went to that scene, and you know what you collected. So I think law enforcement would be such a benefit for them to have it.
Yeah, and this is a good question from Chasing Sunsets. And you can weigh in from the body farm. All those conditions, or the type of what the body's going to look like, it's going to be depend on humidity, temperature, animal activity in that environment. Immediately, within the 24 to 48 hours, you're going to have a lot of composition changes taking place within that body. And after 3 to 4 weeks, you could have some variances, even down to skeletal remains, but not complete. But go ahead.
Right. Well, and then you have animal activity, you have insect activity. There's all these variables that come about, and you don't realize, all the variables that are connected with the body being left out that long. Now, I have gotten evidence from bodies that have been out thrown on the side of the road, not found for months, but there has been ropes, or there has been twine or something where the knots have protected the DNA, or the bindings. There's like I said, there's always the possibility, depending on what she had on, what was found around her.
If she was covered, he could have wrapped her in a blanket.
Yes.
On a personal homicide like that,
Yep.
It's not uncommon for the suspect, to depersonalize it by covering them. So there's a lot of variances, and if that's the case, you're sitting in a gold mine, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I had a case that we've been working on, and it was thrown. In fact, it wasn't far from. It was in southern Utah, I believe, and it had been there for a while. But it was wrapped in so many different layers and ropes that it was like a gold mine there. They're just so, you have to look at those photos, and that's one of the things when I consult on a case. I want to look at the photos, and I want to be able to really dig into that and look, and then what you have to work with.
Yeah. Great question. Take this one here too. This is Happy D or Happy Days. I am an Indigenous woman in Canada. I want to save my DNA in my home. How can I do that? What's the best way, just in case? Wow.
Okay. You know, that there is a big push for Indigenous. There's a lot of Indigenous women that have gone missing. And there's a big push to try to help identify these women if where remains are found, and there's a lot of grants available for that. One of the things I would definitely do to save it is if you want to save it and keep it in a safe, so that if anything happened to you or you wanted to make sure that your DNA was saved, I would just take some sterile swabs. And you can get them in packages and stuff. And some law enforcement agencies offer it. And I would swab, I would do 4, and I would do 2, all over inside your jaw, your mouth, your cheeks. They're called buccal swabs. Buccal cells are on your cheeks, and I'd use it and I'd roll them around and make sure I got a lot of saliva. And you rub those cheeks really good and down around your gums. And then I get the other 2 and do the same thing. And you can put them in a box. Don't put them in plastic. Remember, no plastic. So you can put them in a little swab box, or you can put them in a paper sack, and you can seal it with tape. Put your initials and date across the tape so nobody's opened that. And I would put them in a safe or something. And I would do that with my children. They also have little sponges you can use. But swabs are probably the most easy and, to collect. And you can do that, so to save it in your home. I think it's a great idea. One of the things that when we were talking about Brian Laundrie, I think, if on the search warrant, they did get a lot of software and hardware and computer stuff. But I do believe that if they're serving a search warrant, they would definitely want to have some of Brian's DNA, because we don't know what was at the scene and what they need to match it up to. So definitely getting some of his DNA from off of items of evidence that he had, his toothbrush, a hairbrush that might have hair that has follicle, the root on it. I mean, there's things that are just specific to him that they can get DNA off of. And if they don't have that, then certainly they can get it from a sibling or something like that. But definitely, I would think part of that search warrant would be to obtain the DNA, however they had to.
Yeah, and that would be critical under the fingernails and of Gabby. This one's for you, Jason. What vehicle did Kylen Crystal drive? And then there's a follow-up.
Sure, there was 3 different vehicles that they were accustomed to. At the crime scene was a Kia Sorento. Back at Crystal's work, they left behind a black, 80s Econoline Ford van that they could live in, but at the moment they were in a tent at the crime scene. They also had a flat black Harley Davidson motorcycle.
Okay. And then this one, is it true that there was another suspicious vehicle?
Well, that's what we're trying to identify with the satellite images.
Okay. Yeah, and if you're just joining us, folks, when you get a chance, go do the rerun on this and take a look at some of the information Jason provided initially on. Then I think this one here will help. Whoops, I'm going to show this one. Oh, there it goes. It's actually for Jason. Has he been ruled out? He's actually on the list of 17.
Yeah, we have a list of 17. Now, law enforcement at the Grand County Sheriff's Office, they've already eliminated him, but they have probably access to information that we can never have access to until it comes out in discovery, like cell phone data or something like that is what I'm expecting is why they eliminated him. But I don't have access to that, so I can't, take the luxury being an independent investigation, assuming that their details are right. And I'm not going to take them off the list until someone's proved otherwise.
Yep, and I have one here. Was there anything taken that you know of, if you're able to share?
Not personally aware of anything. That information would be known once they've inventoried the crime scene. The sheriff's office would know that. But to my knowledge, nothing had been reported missing.
Okay, and somebody's reporting here Chasing Sunset, that Gabby was first identified by her favorite sweater, and that her father had identified her. So if that's, factual in nature, then, then of course there would probably be some significant evidence that could be collected from that clothing as a whole, even during the altercation. If there's, if she cut herself or if he cut her, or if there's other things, purging to that effect, that evidence in of itself could present itself on that clothing. So that could be very interesting. Let's see here. You guys have any, our guests, you guys have any more, folks in chat, do you have any more questions of our guest here? We're into this an hour and 35. I promised them an hour and 30. Let's see here. Oh, Jason, is there a website that folks can go to for updates, or they can just call your number? That, guys, if you're just joining us, just follow the ticker down there. You can call Jason directly at his phone number, 801-759-2248, or email him, jason@jenseninvestigations.com. He has been retained by the family to investigate the deaths of Kylen Schulte and Crystal Turner. So he is the guy to give a phone call to. If you have emergency information, call the authorities, but if you can't get a hold of them, call Jason, and he will run your information up that flagpole. Let's see here. What else do we have here? I asked a question 3 times. Okay, Mom, hit me again. Put it up real fast. Mom of 6. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to keep up with everybody, but if you've asked it 3 times, then I'm not doing my job over here. I need to get that question up here. And let's show these guys some love. Let's show Francine and Jason some love here from around the world. Did the girls ever go back over to McDonald's? Let's see here.
No, they did not. After they left Woody's Tavern, they went to a friend's house, which was a married couple with children. And then about midnight, as it turns into Saturday, August 14th, they went back to the camp.
Okay, and Suzanne Myers is correcting me. She says it's a sweatshirt, not a sweater. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. And where is Mom? I'm looking for your question to come up here, kiddo. Let's see here. If I don't know that, I don't think we know that. Let's hear. Yeah, here's some love for you. All the you guys, and by the way, these guys are amazing, aren't they? They are. I mean, we're talking to the brain that created the method of finding, DNA off of rocks. And I mean, Francine, you just knock me over every time. I'm just sitting here going and thinking through this. How many crimes and how many people are you saving? Hey, Karen, show me something. Which one is it? Well, Mom of 6. Where is it? Oh, another show with an expert said Gabby was probably in the elements too long to get good DNA from her fingernails. That's the question. So on another channel, somebody else, a DNA expert, said that because she was in the elements for 6 weeks, they probably couldn't get DNA on fingernails. What say you?
Well, it just depends.
I'd like to chime in on that one too after you, Francine.
Okay, no, go ahead, Jason.
Well, I know technology is so much more advanced than it used to be. The Verogen MySic NGS has actually been tested to get good DNA profile from artifacts from the 13th century. So a few weeks out in the wilderness, hardly even a challenge, in my opinion.
Okay.
This is good technology. I do want to say, when it comes to fingernails, in all my years of experience of obtaining fingernails, of swabbing, of scraping. Depends on how long your fingernails are, number one. And most of the fingernails, and Chris, you could probably attest to this, are not very big. They're quite small. And so it depends. I mean, they're like little slivers, and they swab them. This is what they do. They swab them. And so DNA can last a long time. Now, in Gabby's case, let's say she was struggling and fighting for her life, and she's just trying to dig his hands off of her, and she might have scraped a lot of skin. She could have gotten some blood. She could have done anything. And depending on how long her fingernails were, how jagged they were, how, depending. Yeah. So, you would not just say, okay, because it's this old, we're not going to, because it depends on the elements. It depends on the temperature. It depends on the length. There's just a lot of variables there. So that's something that certainly, with the crime scene photos and the autopsy photos, because I also get autopsy photos, and you can look at their hands, you can see what's been going on. So there's a lot of variables. So you'd want to take that into consideration before you said, nope.
Okay. Can you freeze DNA?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Here's one. Can they extract DNA from tree bark?
I have done that.
Oh, cool. That's a whole show in itself. Yeah. That is that's a cool answer right there.
Because, well, remember, the JonBenet Ramsey case would be a good one. They used a garrote, a wood. It was a paintbrush, I believe. And they also do the same thing with tree branches. And I've done cases where they've used tree branches, a broken tree branch, to use as a garrote to wrap it around a shirt or something to strangle someone. And this happened to be a tree branch that had bark on it, and that's got good porous surfaces in it, And so, yeah, you can get DNA off of tree bark.
How about clothing?
Oh, yeah, that's what it's all about. Hey, Songbird, that is what it's all about, because you don't know where people touch. That's why we look at the crime scene photos. For example, Jason was talking about how the girls just had on T-shirts. And so, there had to be a struggle. Somebody had to do something, and T-shirts would be good. Why are the pants off? Did they take them off? Did the suspect? Depends on how we see them laying, what's going on, what kind of struggle. And you don't know where they touch, but you can look at those crime scene photos. For example, you can see if the shirt has been ripped. You can see if the pants have been pulled down. And those are the areas you're going to get that touch DNA, because those are pulled down by the suspect.
Yeah, and boy, there's a lot of behavioral analysis indications on just in that show.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You guys are amazing. You're amazing. So, tell us about cold case solutions and resource. And by the way, if folks, after this is over tonight, you're going to be able to get their information down below. It'll always be there. You can click on it. It's going to take you right over to Francine, and of course you're running through Jason here, constantly. But so tell them about cold case solutions and resources.
Well, I retired from West Jordan Police Department. And the reason I did is, aside from being on call all the time, I love working cases. And it can be cold or it can be new. But cold cases, there's over 250,000 in the United States that are unsolved. And we need to bring that number down, and we need to keep the number down of the newer ones by these new technologies. And I opened my business, Cold Case Solutions and Resources. And the reason it's called that is, if I don't know the solution, I will find out and give you the resource. It's not all about me. It's about what we can do to help these families and law enforcement have closure or answers. There's really no closure for families, but the answers they've been looking for. And so if I don't have it, I want to be able to let you know where you can go get the answers you need, or what we can do, or what technology is out there and who offers what. This is what it's about, and this is my passion. So I'm doing this because I love it, and I love helping solve these cases. And it's such a good feeling. I can tell you, one of the things that was really touching was on the Angie Dodge case. Christopher Tapp was in prison for 20 years. 20 years. This young man went in as a young man, and 20 years later, he's able to get out because not just because of me, it was a team effort, like Jason and me and you talking right now, and all the people listening. It's a team effort. We want to help solve these cases. And it was a team effort, and I helped and other people helped. But when it came time for Christopher Tapp to be exonerated, because we all worked together, and I gave him this big old hug, and I'll never forget, we had known each other but never met. And on that day, he said, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I can only imagine how difficult it must be for families, for people who've been imprisoned or having to deal with this stuff. And that's better than any money in the world.
Yeah, no, she's talking about a man that spent 20 plus years in prison for something he did not do. And boy, what a rewarding feeling it is. And God bless you, for being that instrument in, a lot of, I always say when, the universe is on schedule, and some people, hate us, cops, have the idea, and then, all of us, and then all of a sudden you get a moment like that and you're hugging that one person.
It's changed a lot too over the years, Chris. I do want to say that police are really, really getting in touch with, they don't, it's not just a number anymore. There's so many that truly do so much work that we don't even know. We don't even see behind the lines. We can't see what's going on, how much effort they put in. And we can sit back and be, the armchair quarterback or whatever and say, this is what you should do and stuff. But if they only knew how much work goes in to this, I think they'd have a different take and realize how much effort they put in on this.
Interesting. This is an interesting. Was there camera footage that captures the altercation between Gabby and Brian? If so, was Kylen also on camera? Do you know that, Jason? I don't know where that came from.
I'm guessing that they're referring to the Moonflower Co-op where Kylen worked, and it's my understanding that there was no video, there was no footage of their altercation out in front of the Moonflower, and it's not even clear whether Kylen even met Brian and Gabby at this point.
Okay. This one here, there's some questions of whether or not the fingernails grow post-mortem.
Oh, because they think they keep growing. I have heard that's true, but I have seen bodies that have been dug up after many years. Mm-hmm. And I can't say that I noticed that they did. They do. The skin does shrink and things pull back. And so that could be why, that happens. But that's a good question. I really wouldn't know that, but certainly a medical examiner would probably know that better than I would.
We'll have to get somebody to weigh in.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jason, any other information? Let me also mention the Sheriff's Office, 435-259-8115. 435-259-8115. And then Jason is been retained by the family, an amazing investigator, bright mind, a really smart dude. His phone number is 801-759-2248. You can send information, any type of tips, any types of leads that you want to remain anonymous.
Those.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Well, I wanted to say one thing that I know that when things happen on the onset, a lot of people are afraid to approach police. They don't want to sound stupid. They think it wasn't a big thing or whatever, but it can be very important. And so Jason's a great person, that you can give that information to and feel, good about at least having it checked out. Don't just assume that it's not worth anything. It could be worth something very important.
So this is an interesting one from Morning Dove. Jason, can you see that? Can DNA be used on the key ring and 2 tags near the ladies' bodies?
Well, I'm not sure why you would need to DNA test the keys. We already know who the owner of the keys were. So you would use DNA techniques in order to identify who was the owner of the keys. But since we figured out using the old, law enforcement kind of, just old techniques, looking for a logo, matching logo, calling the the company and then verifying that the key ring goes to a name and then contacting the person and he says, yeah, I lost my keys and whatnot, can describe adequately where they were lost at. So, yeah, we know who the keys belong to and we don't need to DNA test them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got those eliminated. Sounds like good came in late. I love this one, enlightened one. Does your DNA wash off your clothes in the washer? Asking for a friend. I love this group.
Well, this is what So just know that skin cells are very jaggedy. They're not these smooth little discs, and it's very difficult sometimes. Depends on, what you're using and, how long you're washing and stuff, but this called secondary transfer. So there is such a thing where you can wash things and your DNA can be transferred onto somebody else's and they can still get it off after it's been washed. And so they've done research on that. And yes, it can. It won't disappear because it'll hang in there and you'll probably have less DNA, but it can hang in there and that's been studied.
Amazing. Well, I tell you, you guys have been very gracious guests here this evening. Will you come back? Will you come back if we do this again?
For sure.
Okay, perfect.
Absolutely.
And Jason, this is an open platform during your investigation. If you need a place to get the word out, guys, please let's support Jason in his efforts to bring justice to these, sweet women that did not deserve anything that happened to them in this brutal fashion there in Moab. No. And, please reach out to him with that number down below. Give him the information that he needs to bring closure and peace and just bring some peace back to this sweet family, both families. There are a lot of people involved in this on the other side of this that we just don't see right now. So please reach out to him. And if you do have information, again, please share this video out, hit that like, hit that subscribe button, let people know that this information is sitting here for Jason to get information out around the world. Please share it with everybody that you know, and not only, for the girls, but, for the families as a whole. That poor father sat out there and he is suffering as well as other family members. So I've got an out where we go to Hawaii. Are you guys up for that?
You bet I am. I have some friends there actually. Yeah.
Okay. Jason, Francine, thank you so much. All our mods, we love you guys. Thank you so much for everything you've given us tonight.
Well, thank you.
And for all of our
TYR and your audience.
Yeah.
Yes, they're the best, aren't they?
They are. They really are. Thanks for all the love. I love it.
Yeah. Show them some love, guys, as we go to Hawaii.
Hard working every day. I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts. Wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories.